All right, here we go. We have Gerardo Lopez, formerly of the notorious MS-13 gang. Now, this is the first time we've actually interviewed someone from MS-13, so I just want to go into the history of the gang first, because not only is MS-13 known for the extreme violence, but they're also known for being singled out by Donald Trump in order to deport South Americans in general and children in particular without due process.
Right.
So let's go ahead and get into the whole history. So MS-13 started in the 1980s.
Correct.
Okay. And talk about sort of the situations that caused the group to form initially.
Okay. Well, I guess to talk about MS-13, we have to understand the history of what happened in El Salvador first, which was the white people decided to form MS-13 or Free El Salvador. Before the Civil War even started in El Salvador, it was a right-wing government fighting against taking land away from the campenseros, the farmers, if you will, in El Salvador. And they got tired of it, so they started to unionize and started forming their own groups and fighting against the government. And this happened for several years. And as time went on, there's other uprisings that were coming up in Latin America as well, fighting against their government because they felt oppressed as well. And during this time, it was just chaos in El Salvador, and the United States intervened because they were fearful of these countries in Latin America becoming communist or being, during that time, Soviet Union influenced the region for them to become communist countries. So they started funding this civil war, and aftermath of the civil war, there was hundreds of thousands of deaths. When kids went to school or when they were just around the neighborhood, they saw these wars, bombs going off, walking down the street, seeing bodies being decapitated. It could have been their friends, their family members, or people they just didn't know, but they saw all this violence all together. And late at night, military soldiers from the government will come into the people's houses and try to take away their kids for them to be able to join the military. So these were kids that were 10, 11, 12 years old that were now taught all these things that the government was trained by the School of the Americas in the United States, that all this training came into El Salvador, which was a brutal training, if you will. So parents had no choice but to go ahead and flee El Salvador to a safer country. So they were refugees and they came into the United States. And some of these kids were sent by themselves to go with their aunts or their uncles, and a lot of their kids, their parents had already died. So they went into a neighborhood where pretty much in Pico Union, Koreatown in Los Angeles, where there was already violence, there was already gangs, and there was already drugs. And there was not a whole lot of opportunity for a youth to be able to survive all those things that were going on. So as the gang formed, these kids started going to school, if you will. And when they started going before the gang formed, these kids started going to school, and they were being made fun because of their dialect. Now, the dialect of Salvador is very different from the dialect of Mexico. If a kid from El Salvador tells somebody, hey, ¿qué onda cerote, to a Mexican, the Mexican guy's gonna feel very offended. The same way if a Mexican kid tells a Salvadorian kid, hey, wait, ¿qué onda? The Salvadorian kid's gonna go ahead and get offended. And then you have the Chicano American kid who speaks both languages, and the Chicano will go ahead and be the kid who's born in the United States, but their parents are from some country in Latin America. So there's bullying because of the way they talked, and it was a strange culture to the people living in the neighborhood. Not that just Chicanos or the Mexicans, but kids from other different countries as well. It was somewhat of a culture clash, if you will. And there was a group of kids, not all the Salvadorian kids, there's a whole lot of Salvadorian kids that didn't join MS, but the way that it started was the Salvadorian kids started forming their own group called MSS, which was Mara Salvatrucha Stoners. And the gang started as a protection for anti-bullying, if you will, against other people within schools. And these kids started fighting back. But it consisted of it was more of a heavy metal gang where they went to these concerts like the likes of Black Sabbath, AC/DC. And when they went to the concerts, they saw people that had the ripped up jeans, the shirt with the tongue hanging out, the long hair, head banging and going like this, which was the MS sign. So they adapted that heavy metal sign, which turned out to be the famous MS sign, if you will. So when they were in the street, now you have this group, and they started hanging around in the street, and other gangs took a notice of them that they were uprising, if you will. So from smoking weed to heavy metal, now they were being assaulted by these other gang members, if you will. So they started defending themselves. They started getting locked up. Now, when they started getting locked up, they were still being made fun of because they were saying that they were in a gang, if you will, but they looked like heavy metal people that were going to those concerts. And right there, this is the movie, this is the time when the movie Colors came out, right? You saw the dress, the Nike Cortez shoes, Dickin pants, the Pendleton shirts, the tattoos, the shaved heads. So from right there, they started adapting this style and the tattoos as well. And they also began to learn the language, if you will, English, because a lot of these kids, they came over when they were 10, 11, or 12. And when they got deported back to El Salvador, when they got off that plane from El Salvador, it was like, you know, rock stars coming off that plane that kids started seeing them because they were dressed like the cholos from the movies. They had the tattoos and they spoke English as well. So of course the girls right there, you know, they flocked to them. The kids saw that the other girls were flocking to them. They wanted to go ahead and be just like them. So when they landed in El Salvador, it was a whole different culture for them because a whole lot of them were already in the United States for several years. That was their home. And El Salvador, it was a strange country to them now because their family ties wasn't as grounded, if you will, because a lot of their family had got killed in the Civil War. So they had kids, then they had their life in the United States of America, so their plan was to always try to go ahead and come back, but at the same time, there was people that began to jump people in over there in Salvador, and that's how the gang continued to grow and grow.